What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast for another Sunday MMA recap show. We're going to talk about the fights that happened last night, as well as some future headlines. What's next? We always look at MMA fights, and then we say to ourselves, what is next? That's always the next question. Our minds are so quick to move on to the next fight. And last night, we had some good action. Colby Covington fought ruthless Robbie Lawler on the big network, the big ESPN, not ESPN Plus, but the big channel. And today, for the Sunday MMA recap show on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, I'm joined by my colleague. How about that? Ty B of Trainwreck Sports. What's going on, buddy?
Yeah, it's going great. Beautiful Sunday morning here in Buffalo. Had that rain to kind of cool everything down a little bit. Thought it would help my allergies. I still can't breathe, but, another day, another dollar, so we're going to keep going. And, yeah, UFC on ESPN5 was great yesterday. You had an afternoon. It gave me something to do all day, waste my time at work. So, I'm ready to talk about it, break it down. There's a lot of exciting storylines going into these upcoming fights, so, I'm excited to get talking about it.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you join me, and obviously I'm right there with you. The whole right side of my nose is completely plugged today. So that's a day in the life of Western New York in the summertime. But Ty, so what were your thoughts, to get started here, what were your thoughts on Colby Covington versus Robbie Lawler? I think heading into the fight, if I were to kind of think of my mindset heading into it, I thought that it would be a high-paced fight with a lot of action. Could Robbie Lawler catch Colby Covington? Could Colby Covington take down Robbie Lawler? And now, watching that fight and knowing what took place, that was a pretty one-side dominant performance by Colby Covington. For my money, I can't remember a time where anyone has done that to Robbie Lawler.
No, he was completely blanked on the scorecard. Colby Covington gets the unanimous decision, all 50, in the five-round bout. That's just an incredibly impressive performance against, a solid UFC veteran, a guy who's contended in that class for a long time. So, it seemed like early on Lawler was kind of trying to feel things out, but every time, with his stand-up game, he was trying to get there, there was just another takedown attempt. And it just threw him off so much. He could just never find his footing in that fight, never really get his range. He was really looking for that one-shot knockout. And Covington has a solid chin to begin with, so that in itself was going to be a tough task. And on top of just the amount of volume that Covington threw yesterday, it was just absolutely chaos for Robbie Lawler's mind. He had no time to think, no time to react. It was just natural instincts at that point. And, there's only so much you can do when someone's throwing 500 punches at you in 25 minutes.
Right, and as you said, it was chaos. It's funny you say that because that's Colby's nickname, Colby Chaos Covington. That's the best way to describe his style. It was almost as if, the punches that Colby Covington the punches that he was throwing were not the hardest, but the pace and the activity was just off the charts. I've never seen a fighter have that type of cardio, just continuously pressuring Robbie Lawler, whether he was, standing in the pocket with him and landing, punches. It would force Robbie Lawler to kind of be leery of that. And then when Lawler was leery of the punches, he would forget about the takedown. So he was always keeping Robbie Lawler guessing, and it looked like from early on that first round, second round, third round, fourth round, it was just a steady progression of Lawler just flat out looking, in my opinion, I thought he looked pretty confused out there, overwhelmed, just completely, just overwhelmed throughout the course of that fight. And for Colby Covington to have embarked on the career that he has, it's no secret the guy loves to talk trash. But it's one thing to talk trash, and then it's another to back it up, and I thought he did that in spades yesterday.
Yeah, I think especially with Covington, you look at his kind of career trajectory. He was like 7-1, garnering pretty much no attention, with some big early wins in the UFC, and he sort of went to the drawing table and he figured out sometimes there needs to be a heel.
Right.
As a heel, you're going to sell fights, you're going to make money, you're going to generate attention, and it works for the WWE, it works for the UFC. Like, just think about, McGregor Diaz, or, McGregor Habib. Like, you have these big, dominant personalities, and someone is going to be the heel, someone's going to be, on that opposite side of the spectrum, and everything he's done is really put himself in that light, and, I don't really agree with necessarily all the stuff he's done in doing that, but you have to respect the fact that, he does do that. He's doing what he's doing. He's putting on that show, but, like, he is then carrying that into the actual show, the actual event. And for that, like, as a fan of MMA, you have to be happy.
Right.
And for him to do that to Robbie Lawler is just, it's crazy because, Lawler's got some of the best hands in that weight class, in that division. He's put people out like a light numerous times, and just having just minimal success against Colby Covington just shows where he is right now in that class and why he is the number one contender right now.
Right. And as you mentioned, you touched on it. I'd be the first to admit, I was very happy for his performance. I thought it was a phenomenal performance. And then, I think he wears that heel hat so well, sometimes he oversteps it. And he made a comment in regards to, Matt Hughes in his post-fight interview that I was just like, come on, man, don't rain on your performance with a comment like that. Now, the media, all they're going to ask him is about the comment, and sure enough, when he does his post-fight interview, that was really all the media was asking him about, not about how he had just completely dominated a former champ. So it's a double-edged sword. He has to roll with what brought him there, and sometimes he does that, but then there's other times where he just oversteps it just a little bit, So
like he just got to realize he's gonna have to answer for it, when things like that do happen. And if you're gonna play that role, you have to be able to respond in that role as well. And I thought it was in bad taste and everything else. It just, why do you bring the Trumps there? Why do you try to be so divisive, I guess? Why are you trying to... You give a lot of people more reason to just completely tune out from you. It's not just, like, getting people to dislike you as being a heel. Like, he's almost going, like, a couple steps too far.
Right.
Where, you bring politics into sports. Like, that's sort of been a no-no. Everyone stick to sports, blah, blah, blah. Like, the general population, at least, doesn't want politics with their sports. Sports are their escape. It's their way to get away. And him doing that, and just, I don't know. It's just, I get what he's doing. It's just a little too much. I don't know if, he's got someone working with him trying to help his PR, or a manager who's, helping with this. But I don't know. You can tell it is calculated and he is doing it. But you're obviously going to draw attention away then from your performance. People aren't going to be talking about what he did against Robbie Lawler. They're talking about his violence against Hughes, and that's not what you want dominating, the headlines if you're going to be trying to vie for a title.
Right.
If you're going to want that fight, because there are a couple other candidates. Like, obviously he's the number one contender right now, but you have game-bred Jorge Masvidal,
right,
who's, a pit bull. I mean, him and Leon Edwards, I think, have both, made a claim that they want to fight Usman. So you have other guys waiting in the wings. Like, don't give Dana a reason to give someone else the fight.
Right, and if I'm Dana White and I hear him make that comment about Matt Hughes, that's one of the former, champions, one of the guys that kind of paved the way for guys like Colby Covington to really make a living in this sport.
Exactly.
So it's kind of biting the hand that feeds you, and in a way, just not really paying respect to the guys that, paved the way for this sport to be what it is today. And I was really shocked by that. And there are times where you can hear some of the things he says and you can chuckle and you can laugh and say, oh my God, this is so corny and over the top. But that comment was just not in good taste. And anyone would agree to that, I think. So that being said, you mentioned that sometimes Colby Covington's words can kind of do the opposite, have the opposite effect of what he thinks it will have. It'll have a negative effect on his career, and that there are other challengers for Kamaru Usman. But I personally think that, Colby, as you mentioned, is the bona fide number one welterweight contender in the UFC, that he has to fight Kamaru Usman at this point. He's just done far too much, and he had won the interim title, was supposed to fight Tyron Woodley, was passed over twice, once for Darren Till versus Woodley, once with Usman versus Woodley. You would say the same, right? Would you say that Usman and Covington is really essentially the fight to make right now?
Yeah, I don't think Dana would seriously consider Masvidal Edwards unless something like drastic happened. It's the obvious fight to make. It's the big name fight now, because so many people are hating Covington, and the fact the whole spectacle of the post fight, him and Usman, and having to get the security. I knew that was going to happen. They built it up towards the end of that fight. If you listen,
right.
I believe going between one of the rounds, they showed Usman up on set and said how he was going to be doing the post fight and interviewing the winner, and they alluding to what was going to happen. You knew that was going to happen,
right?
I thought it was a little played out.
Yeah, it was forced
for the general fan, especially just someone who likes MMA, doesn't really follow it too much, and just happened to be watching on ESPN. Yeah, that's something that'll get your attention. That gives you reason to buy that pay-per-view when that fight's made, and that's what you need. Is if you have that reason, you get those just the general fan to buy.
Right.
That's what you're looking for, is Dana, because you're going to have your diehards who are buying every event, all that, but you need to gain those people and get them into your fan base, get them more dedicated. So I think that will be the fight to make. I want to say one thing. Colby Covington, you were my rival in UFC 3. Knocked you out last night in the first round, 128 into the first round to be precise. Got him with a spinning back kick, knocked him down, a couple on the ground. Now I'm the third-ranked welterweight, so I'm making my way to the title. Hopefully I'll get that today. I think I got a date with Woodley soon.
That's awesome. Yeah, good luck on your rise to the top. That you only got a couple people left to fight, right? If you're ranked number 3.
Yeah, I'm third now, so we're almost there.
Almost there. That's awesome. I definitely think that the case is to be made that the welterweight division right now, I think since the days of GSP, is probably hotter than it's ever been. With Colby,
there's a lot of contenders, a lot of skilled guys who
right.
do a lot of different things.
And between fighters that are moving around in weight, we'll get to that a little bit later when we talk about Anthony Pettis and Nate Diaz, but there's so many matchups to make when fighters are fighting at their natural weight, and oftentimes those fights end up being better. But you want to talk about a very interesting storyline outside of this welterweight division, just in the political realm of the UFC, the hierarchy, the power struggles, all that stuff between Dana White and fighter A, B, C, D, or E. It seems like Dana has always had these rough patch relationships with some of his fighters, whether it's Tito Ortiz, John Jones, Anderson Silva, even GSP. I could name a bunch of instances that support those claims. But most recently, Dana White had scheduled an interview with Laura Sanko, who's a correspondent for the UFC, and he just came right out and said that due to the fact that Chris Cyborg won't fight Amanda Nunes, in his words, that Chris Cyborg will not fight Amanda Nunes due to the fact that she wants to fight other fighters, she doesn't want to fight the best, he is going to release her from her contract and allow her to go, to any other promotion. Now, her last fight versus Felicia Spencer was her last fight on her contract. She had a 90-day window where she could renegotiate with the UFC. And about 5 days into that, Dana White just says, no, we're good. We're not going to renegotiate. You can go wherever you want. Now, there's a huge backstory to this. They've had a lot of public, spats between one another. And I want your take on this. What do you think about this whole situation? And do you think the UFC was right in cutting Chris Cyborg?
Yeah, so it's a unique situation in sports when you're in the MMA world as opposed to, say, the NFL, because you have all these different, fighting organizations. So the UFC has, that exclusive 90-day period to renegotiate, and then there's a period after that where they have exclusive matching rights to any contract you sign.
Right.
So, for the fact that Dana said, we're just straight up releasing her, we're not even going to seek anything, we don't even want to pursue matching rights, or we don't care. But you have Cyborg come out and she's, sort of criticizing the organization as a whole. Like, you don't do that.
Right.
In a sports industry like MMA, whereas, like, if you're Antonio Brown in the NFL, like, you can say whatever you want about the league. Like, you're the best, like one of the top 5 receivers, you're going to still be in the league. You're going to be on a roster. It's going to be tough for Cyborg because, you have all these other smaller places, Invicta and whatever else, but you're never going to get that same money ever again. You're going to be blackballed from the UFC. You're not coming back, and it's going to be sort of the last we're going to really see from her in a big way, which kind of sucks. That fight against Felicia Spencer was a great fight. The first time she'd ever been cut in a professional fight, I believe. And Felicia Spencer, coming in hard and heavy with some elbows, being able to last 3 rounds with her was, nice to see for a young fighter, someone who doesn't have a ton of experience yet, or a lot of potential. But I don't know, it's just interesting to see the way everything works out. Dana's going to have those power struggles with people because everyone's going to, you're going to have times where people don't see eye to eye on things, whether it's, the promotion they're getting or not getting the fights they want. Like, those issues are going to arise, and you just have to minimize them. Is the big thing, because you don't want to lose a lot of good fighters. But where we are right now with every division, almost, it seems like there's just every division just so deep. There's so many people who are starting to contend, and like even heavyweights for a couple of years were down for so long, and now it seems like a renaissance in that division. So people are replaceable in MMA, so they have to kind of fall in line the greatest, but it's the way it is right now.
Right, I agree with that, and that's a very interesting take, because I think the biggest kind of point that you touched on is that Cyborg will never have the shine in any other promotion that she had in the UFC, whether she was a former champ, whether she is the champion of any division in the UFC or not. The UFC is the NFL of MMA. It's the Premier League. It's the number 1 league. It's got the best fighters, and obviously the biggest promotional push behind it, because it's been churning for so long, far longer than any other current MMA organization. So, and without saying this, I guess I just kind of did. The UFC is pretty much a monopoly on the sport of mixed martial arts, just like the NFL is to football. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but when you do have instances where a promoter and a fighter have to interact and do business with one another, and they have to mutually agree on things, the structure of combat sports as a business is far different than that of any other sport. And you have situations like this where the president of the organization just says, we're done with it. I think it sucks for the fans. And the fans are kind of at the mercy of those business struggles. And as hard as Dana White tried to make that Amanda Nunes-Cyborg rematch, it stinks that fight will never happen. But I guess, did it really need to happen? Because Amanda Nunes finished her so fast?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a fight that would particularly move the needle for me.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Like, she's just kind of running through everyone. Like, you just want to keep kind of seeing her take on someone else, because no one's even, like, came close to beating her, you know what I mean?
Right,
like,
right.
I guess the fight with Rose was good for a while until I literally sat on my couch. I thought she died for, like, 30 seconds. Oh, my God. But, yeah, I don't know. Like, let's just kind of keep her cycling through and just beating everyone, just making a legacy, just proving she's the best by, just different names.
Right, and that's how I feel. I feel like it's her time now, and Cyborg, let's just say they did make that fight, Amanda Nunes and Cyborg, it's signed, sealed, and they're going to deliver it to us, just like they said they would, January of 2020. That was the date that was looked at.
Yep.
I would look at that fight, and it'd be very hard for me to see Cyborg winning it. So
no, I don't think so. And
right.
I don't like if that's your main event. Like, I don't know if you're getting my money on that one. Like,
right,
it would have to be like a co-main event. Like,
right,
and I don't know. Sometimes it's tough to whether someone's getting injured, people backing out, and other things. So I don't know. Like you don't really want that to lead the card for sure.
Right, and if it was a main event, I'd be like, okay, they're doing a rematch between the two most high-profile women's MMA fighters currently in MMA, and the first fight was not close. I don't like the soon or immediate rematches after fights that were not close, after knockout.
It's like, what is Cyborg going to add to her game? Like, I don't know. I just don't see her developing something in her game at this point in her career that's going to give her the one-up over Nunes right now.
Right, and if you were, looking
she's got power, but
right, she's got power, but even in that first round of that fight, it really told a lot. I don't even know how many. I think it was 61 seconds that fight lasted. Even in the 61 seconds, you saw that the first couple exchanges with Amanda Nunes, she was dog tired, and she couldn't handle Amanda Nunes' power that she throws within her hands. So it's very tough. I feel for her in the way that you kind of mentioned, that she won't ever get the shine that she had in the UFC with any other organization, but it's kind of her fault. She trashed the organization a lot after a fight with Felicia Spencer, and she kind of bit the hand that fed her, and in a similar way to what Colby Covington kind of was saying. Sometimes these remarks after these fights are just not conducive to a fighter's career. You'd just be better off letting your manager handle that. Let your agent handle that. Let the management company just handle all the business side of it, obviously oversee it, but sometimes fighters, they talk too much, right? I don't know.
Yeah, she just kind of put her foot in her mouth, pretty much.
Right.
Just trying to do a little too much, trying to stay relevant. But the fact that it really comes down to the fact she wouldn't fight Nunes, it's just hilarious, to hear Dana literally doubled down on his comments too, yesterday.
Oh yeah.
No, it's squarely because she won't fight Nunes.
Right, yeah, he doubled that. He triple quadrupled down on that comment.
Yeah, that's just a bad look, because in something like combat sports, you want to always seem tough and you'll take on anyone whenever. And for your own promoter to be like, yeah, she wouldn't take on the best fight we could give her. So
the fight that everyone wanted to see and the fight that they wanted to make. So they had two parties saying yes, and the other party said no. So it takes all three of the parties to come to an agreement to make a fight. So we'll see what happens with her. If I was a betting man, I would say she'll end up in Bellator, or she'll end up overseas in Singapore fighting in one championship or something like that. I could definitely see that. But I do know that she'll probably be the biggest free agent name in quite a while, and probably since Rory McDonald a couple years ago, and it should be interesting to see where she goes. Moving on from that topic of discussion, I definitely wanted to have you on to preview, I think, the card of the summer. Easily the card of the summer.
Before we get to 241, I just got one more performance from yesterday that really stood out to me.
Oh, yeah, sure.
The guy who's going to be a contender, I think, Nasrat Haqparast.
Oh, yeah.
That guy has got some hands.
Yeah, he does. He's very slick, very skilled, very well-rounded, too. And,
got a performance of the night bonus there, that knockout the second round. First round, you could just see, he was just kind of taking planting blows, and was just kind of getting out of the way of everything, finding his timing, getting his range. And then when he started kind of unleashing, you're like, oh, yeah, that's not going to be good in the next round, and then just started teeing off. Yeah,
Right.
He's going to be dangerous. I just wanted to mention
Oh,
that
yeah, yeah. And I thought he was very patient in there, too. And another fight that I really enjoyed, even though it didn't last too long, was Jim Miller and Clay Guida. Anytime you see two vets of the UFC get into an octagon and share it, they had so many, I think they had like 9 or 10 mutual opponents, but they just never, cross paths. And for them to finally cross paths, and Clay Guida rocked Jim Miller with a straight punched right to the jaw. I thought Jim Miller was out, and then Jim Miller recovered very quickly and rocked Clay Guida, and then got almost a jumping guillotine, and choked him unconscious. And Herb Dean was a little late stopping that one. Just a little bit, yeah. But that was a good fight. I always like watching Jim Miller fight. The fact that he's fought 33 fights with the UFC.
Yeah, most of all time.
That is ridiculous. I mean, I knew that he'd been around a long time, obviously, but just when you put a number on it and you put that in perspective, that's remarkable. And he's not fighting, tomato cans. He's fighting, the best of that division. So. Yeah, I look forward to seeing who he's going to fight next, because that fight only lasted 58 seconds. You'd like to think that he'll get a quick turnaround.
Oh yeah, that's the one thing too. I like when guys, they get an early finish and they're actually looking to pick up a fight right away. Like that's why I love Cerrone and people of that out. Like just to be able to provide that constant entertainment, like you didn't take any shots to your head, you didn't do any damage to your body really.
Right.
Take that quick recovery time, get back into camp, and keep doing what you're doing, making money for yourself, like providing for your family. You just love to see it. And you just gotta respect that grind.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the hunger for those guys is always there. That flame is always lit. So I look forward to seeing him back in there. So, as I mentioned a little bit ago, we got the biggest card of the summer, the biggest card that this summer has to offer, August 17th, live on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. The main event is Daniel Cormier, the UFC heavyweight champ, versus the former UFC heavyweight champ Stipe Miocic. And it feels like a long time ago when these two guys actually fought. And Daniel Cormier pretty much shook up the MMA world and knocked out Stipe Miocic in the first round. DC coming up from light heavyweight to heavyweight. What was that?
Champ.
Yeah, champ DC. And, he knocked out Stipe. And then the co-main event of this card, you got Anthony Pettis versus Nate Diaz, who is finally coming back after 3 years away from the sport. And then you have Yoel Romero and Paulo Costa. These three fights, I think, I am so excited for these three fights. These fights have major implications for every fighter within that octagon. And I want to get your take on it. So we'll start with the main event, because how do you see this rematch being different than the first fight?
Yeah, that's interesting because, DC is obviously a great wrestler. He can throw the hands. I think Stipe, you're just going to have to work some real good takedown defense. If you end up on your back, you can't get too nervous. You can't waste too much energy down there defending, and you want to be able to, get yourself into a good position to get out of there. Without obviously absorbing too much damage. If Stipe can do that, I think he can do what he normally does with his hands, with his stand-up game. If he can get in on DC, maybe get some, good in close, some dirty boxing, get some elbows on him. I think as a fight Stipe can win. Do I think he necessarily does? I don't know about that. We're a couple weeks out. I'm still on the fence on that one. I think DC, I probably would give the upper hand to DC still, because I think he is still the more well-rounded fighter, the more technical guy. Just has a couple more tricks in his bag,
Right.
So So I would love for Stipe to win. The Cleveland volunteer firefighter, that grit, blue collar guy. Like, yeah, I would love to see him do it. Bring the title back to Cleveland. See him at Browns games, chugging a beer with his title for Baker. Give him a little incentive to throw a touchdown or something.
Right.
But I don't know. I would like to see it. He needs to add a little something to his game, I think, to really be able to beat DC, unless he gets kind of lucky with a shot early. I don't know. I see this one going maybe three, maybe 4 rounds.
Okay. Yeah. I would agree with that. I think too, and as far as what you were saying, like, I think Daniel Cormier has far more experience within a fight, and I say that not as a knock on Stipe. I say that it's almost as if Stipe knocking out the guys that he was knocking out as the heavyweight champ, or even on the climb up to the heavyweight champ, almost hurt him in this fight with DC, because DC has fought anyone and everyone. And
yeah, I was going to make that point. It's like
right.
The fact that you don't have as much ring time.
Right.
Some of these guys, where the heavyweight division was a couple of years ago, was all these guys like Bigfoot and everyone. A lot of early knockouts, like
right.
crazy. Like first round, like guys literally would just come in and throw the hands and get out of there. If you made it to a second round, these guys literally looked like they ran 2 marathons and couldn't. Yeah, like so. Like when DC gets in there, gets that title, beats Stipe, it kind of forces some of these guys. If you ever want to be the champion, you have to develop more things in your game. And I think, looking at the division, there are more guys now who have to be more well-rounded because of what DC brings to the heavyweight class.
Right, and he's got that game plan. He can always look at a fighter, even John Jones, and I know he lost to John Jones twice, but he went 5 rounds the first time, and the second time he did get caught, he did get finished, but there were moments in that second fight where he was winning. He at one point punched John Jones, and John Jones' mouthpiece went flying out of his mouth. So, even the fights that DC has lost, which are only 2 fights, he has shown a lot. And obviously in the fights that he's won, you look at the names that he's beat. I would definitely say in a fight with Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic, it might be just the case of one guy being more well-rounded than the other. And it's not saying that Stipe stinks or that Stipe's not good enough. It's just Daniel Cormier can game plan and use his skills a little bit better. He's got a little bit bigger of a toolbox, I think, than Stipe. And if Stipe goes into that octagon with the same game plan that he had the first fight, it might end sooner than the first fight did. So
yeah,
I definitely could see it going a lot longer. I definitely agree with the 3rd, 4th round assessment there. Now, the co-main event, you have Anthony Pettis versus Nate Diaz, and I think the most intriguing fact of this fight is that this fight is at 170 pounds, and Anthony Pettis looked very good at 170 as far as in that octagon, elusive, slick, and he ended up taking some shots from Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, but you saw the power difference at 170 of Anthony Pettis throwing just this Superman hook and knocking out Wonderboy unconscious. You see the weight difference benefiting guys like Nate Diaz in his fights with Conor McGregor, and just across the sport, you see a benefit of guys fighting at their natural weight. Even Daniel Cormier, who we were just talking about. So how do you see this fight going down? This is probably one of the tougher fights for me to pick in recent memory because both guys are so skilled on the feet and both guys are so skilled on the ground. This at one point probably could have been a title fight, in the past, and now these guys are finally fighting.
Yeah, if you look at Pettis' recent fights, his last 6 fights, he's 3-3. But if you look at who he's lost to, Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, and Tony Ferguson, and that was a TKO corner stoppage.
Right.
Because his eye swelled up, I believe it was.
Yep.
And like the weight change has been huge for him. I think just across the sport, like you're saying, you fight a little more healthy. It's closer to your normal weight. Like, you're not having to cut weight. You're just able to keep more stamina. You're just healthier generally. You're more hydrated, all that other stuff. So it gives you that stamina. A lot of these guys you see, you're going, 2-3 rounds and just, bulldozing people at the end of these fights because they have that extra little boost that they didn't normally have. You really did see that from Pettis, just throwing absolutely bombs, whether it was against Ferguson or Thompson, his two most recent fights. And he's been great lately. And Nate Diaz obviously has had some big fights in his career as well, but I think Pettis right now has just looked so good, even though his record hasn't really showed it.
Right.
But since, coming back after that Poirier loss, and with his fights last year and his first fight this year, it's just everything's trending in the right direction. I think this is just going to be one of those slobber knocker fights. This is going to be, similar to him versus Ferguson or Ferguson-Cerrone. Like, these guys are just going to go in there and they're just going to throw.
Right.
And, those are the best fights.
For sure. For sure. That's when you see pretty much every facet of MMA kind of rolled into one, even stuff on the ground. There's never an MMA fight with
they'll end up on the ground.
Right.
If they're just throwing like that, because guys are going to get knocked down.
Right.
That's just going to happen.
Right. And I think, for me, when I look at this fight for Nate Diaz, I wonder, why was this one the one that got him off the couch? Not that Nate Diaz has been sitting on the couch eating Cheetos. It's actually been the exact opposite. You go to Nate Diaz Instagram, you go to Nate Diaz, his Twitter, everything. This guy is in the best physical condition.
Yeah, it's been almost 3 full years since he's fought.
Right, 3 full years. Why is this one the one that...
It'll be 3 days short of 3 years.
Right. That's crazy. And I think that there is a bigger story to this fight than what is being talked about. This fight could be pumped up so much more than it already has been, and it's due to the fact that these guys have not liked each other for over a decade. They've had a rivalry, a silent rivalry, where they've kind of crossed paths, but haven't crossed paths in the cage. And now that they finally are, I think this fight has fight of the year written all over it. I really do.
It has that potential.
Right. As far as your pick, you're going with Pettis, though. You think that he's just a little bit.
I would lean Pettis right now. For sure.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think Pettis is a little bit more elusive, has a lot more different things that he can throw at Nate Diaz. And honestly, I worry about Nate Diaz a little bit, just in terms of the damage that he's taken over the course of his career.
He keeps his head a little too much in the pocket,
right,
coming forward, and he'll get himself caught. Like, he's got a great chin, so he'll eat some of those. But yeah, obviously over the span of a career where you have 30 professional fights, like, those shots are going to add up. Like, he hasn't fought in 3 years. It's not just
right,
like, because he doesn't want to get paid.
He's got to heal.
yeah. You don't want to get out of the UFC in a couple of years and not be able to even talk to your family. So
right.
Obviously, health's number one and all that. But there's some other good fights on this card too.
Oh, for sure. And if there was a fight out there that we haven't talked about, the next one I'd like to kind of dive into quick would be Yoel Romero and Paulo Costa. I see Paulo Costa as one of those fighters that could be the future at 185, but Yoel Romero is Yoel Romero. He's a tough task for anyone. You could just ask Robert Whittaker. Although Whittaker beat him, those were wars. Those fights were very hard fought. How do you see that fight going down with Romero and Costa?
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. So Costa hasn't fought in a year as well.
Right.
But he's got 4 straight TKOs since coming into the UFC. He's a dynamic striker. All those guys out of Brazil have solid jiu-jitsu, so he offers some ground game. Yoel Romero is sort of like the now of that division. If you're able to take him down, you're really stepping up and planting a flag for yourself, to start making a run. I can see that happening. it's always tough when guys, take a long absence from the ring, but, as long as you're getting in your training, you're doing those things, still adding to your repertoire and not just, just working out or just doing your normal punching routines. Just trying to become a more dynamic fighter. Still at just 28, like not too old. So he's got a chance to make a run, but it would have to really start with that fight.
I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't agree more as far as when guys take that year off, 2, 3, it's tough to get back in there. You got to be, and I say this a lot, it's a catchphrase I say on the podcast.
Great performance in that fight. He offers a lot of dynamic striking. I like what he does with his legs. That length just is going to offer anyone trouble, even a veteran like his son Sao. I think that'll be a great fight. Maybe they get into the third round, and I think Sandhagen gets a finish there. That'll be maybe like a fight of the night candidate that's sort of off everyone's radar.
I couldn't agree more, and that's what I love about the UFC cards too, is that you have they definitely make the card the way it's supposed to be made, where you have one featured fight on the prelims that really could set the tone for that division, or that division in which it's competed in. Like featherweight, you have a champion at featherweight that I think is making a case as the best featherweight of all time. Maybe he's not quite there yet, but he's definitely building a case. So if that's the situation that we're in, he's got to have contenders. He's got to have a laundry list, a grocery list of contenders that are waiting in the wings that fans can see for free. And I think Sandhagen could be one of those guys. Is that fight at 145 or is that 135?
I'm not positive on that.
Yeah.
That's what I was just wondering. But
yeah.
I didn't completely check.
But either or, whether it's 145 or 135, really, you have to build contenders, and you have to build them in a way where fight fans can see it. But I know one thing. I am super pumped for UFC 241. You're picking Cormier, you're picking Pettis, and would you say Romero or would you say Costa?
I think I'm gonna lean towards the youth. I'm gonna go